So now that we have the tenons done, the mortise is done, tenons are split, the rails have been shaped, it's a good time to do a dry fit. So, you know, plans are great, and yes, if you do everything just right, they should come out exactly as the plan goes, but that's very rare that ever happens. So what's really important right now is when we start doing these slats, so here's the top slats, I basically get dadoed, and there's a few things that are important. It's got to fit this, so we need to make sure we get that established. But then it's the same like the shoulder to shoulder fit. If you're off on that, it can either do this or the slats won't go down because it's too short. So this is where you just bring this together, put a clamp on it, get an actual measurement. So no longer looking at the plan. The plan's left behind now. Now it's working off of your actual. And then that way you can get that measurement. We can go over and start dadoing this. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this dry fit. It's looking pretty nice. So now I'm going to put a clamp on it. Really, just at the top, I want to know what that measurement is. So outside to outside, 16 inches. And that's, I think that's what the plan calls for, 14.5 on the inside. So I'll just leave this together and basically bring this over to the table saw. And so when we start dadoing this, we know exactly what we're doing. But really, you've got to figure out the overhang. So this is 17, this is 16, so it's an inch difference. So this should be overhanging on the outside, should be a 1/2 inch. So if we came in from the edge, scribed a 1/2 inch mark with an X on the waist side of it, then it's all about the fit here. So we'll establish that first and then get the fit perfect over on the dado. And this is just going to go down like, again, this isn't much of an arc, but we're not really trying to match that because then that's going to get a little bit crazy. You could go in, if that was a concern to me, is what I would do is I'll end up getting this, go about 1/4 inch deep, so it just sits down on this. So when you look up, there's not a gap there. But of course, you're creating a flat like this that's going to be sitting on an arc. So if you wanted to get real finicky about that, you could come back in later on with a chisel and undercut it, like bevel it back in, so that way it sits on the outside edges and not rocking around. It's not that big of a deal. I think on the one I did, the demo one, I didn't even bother. There's a tiny little bit of a gap there. Yeah, all right, so table saw, this measurement here is kind of important if you don't want to have to like bevel this rail back to match anything. Basically when this comes down on here, if this underside intersects right with that perfectly, that's great. So the measurement for that is this. And it's just under 1/4. So I'll sneak up on that until this fits. When this goes down, it bumps up against that and it bumps on that all at the same time. So got the dado stack in place, did the test fit, made sure it fit real well, got it first time, no problem. It took me about 20 times to actually get that fit. So as I was doing that, what you really should do, and this is a handy little tip, you got a dado stack at home, go ahead, before you mill these sides to final thickness, go ahead, just run a groove. It takes a little more time because you're going to do that and break it apart, but just run that groove so you have it, and that's your test. Take that to the planer with you, and then when you're planing this down, you can sneak up, just barely move the plane until you get a perfect fit. And it just saves you time over here. If you go under 3/4, then you have to add shims and stuff. So that's why I just took 20 minutes to get the shims and stuff just right to get the fit. So if you remember that, that's a good thing to do. Now that I have this, I've got my fence, and I'm just going to ride right up against my fence as I go through to do this cut. Now, my fence is running perfectly parallel to my blade. So if your fence is a little bit off pitched inwards, that could give you some trouble. And the way you usually notice as you're going through, it's wanting to move it and it ends up burning the actual joint, the dado that you're doing. So if that's the case, it's not a bad idea to have a block on your fence, clamp the block, then you come to that block, hold on as you go through, then you leave that block behind. But in my fence, I know from using it over and over again, this works just fine. Got the faces just up to what I want to see. Got my layout one that I laid out the marks, making sure it looks good on here. So I should be ready to go. I think it's about 3/16 deep. Have a look at my test. All right, so should be ready. If you're also finding you're getting a little bit of blowout on the back side, which dado blades can do, this one's pretty good. You know, nothing wrong with having a sacrificial piece that's going to help that blowout. Looks pretty good. You know, a little snug, but then we've still got a sand, so I think that'll work out. The next step really is going to the bench, doing some of the profiling, and then sanding it all before we glue it up. And depending on the type of finish you're using, you know, you can pre-finish it if you wanted. The problem is you can't pre-finish the outside because you're going to end up trimming those wedges off later. So it's probably just easier, glue the whole thing up and then get in there with a rag, or if you spray, you can still spray it too. All right.